This segment of Open Up is brought to you in part by Abeta-Weed, the locally owned company that has everything you need for lush, weed-free gardens and lawns, from the smallest backyards to the property of the biggest businesses, and with top-quality equipment and products better than the big chains, and they service what they sell. Located on Rosedale Highway, just east of Callaway, across from the promenade. Be loyal, buy local, abetaweed.com.
You bet, you bet.
And just like that, thanks to the miracles of technology and advertising, we're back.
You bet. And we're back this time with a friend of this show, Philip Lee. Philip, so glad to have you back. You are our only repeat customer that we've actually had back twice because you have so much to say. And this past week, as we've been pointing out in the newspaper, a huge headline about gays in the church and what the new Pope is saying about that. So before we get to that, let's establish for people who didn't see you the first time who you are and what you've been through and what brings you to this point in your life and your own outreach to other people.
I'm the executive director of His Way Out Ministries, a Christian ministry with its home base of operation right here in Bakersfield. But we also have extensions of our ministry now in Guyana, South America, various parts in the Caribbean, specifically Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. As well, we are now in the process of planting a branch of His Way Out Ministries in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're a very, very specialized ministry, reaching to men and women with unwanted same-sex attraction, offering biblical discipleship, mentoring, helping them to work through their issue of same-sex attraction. We're also a ministry that offers very specific ministry to parents when families are impacted by homosexuality or lesbianism. And thankfully, we are enabled to travel worldwide, equipping and teaching the church on the complexities of same-sex attraction so the church would be more effective in helping those individuals, again, with unwanted same-sex attraction.
And historically, the church has not been effective. The church has been seen as rejecting, condemning people, being an unwelcome place for people with same-sex attraction to come and be accepted. Tell us about that and what you're trying to do to turn that around.
You're absolutely right. There are times in history where the church has reacted badly to both men and women with same-sex attraction. Sometimes the church hasn't reacted whatsoever. But we still believe at His Way Out Ministries that from the very beginning, God intended His church to be His vehicle to reach wounded, broken, hurting humanity. Today, we have men and women worldwide struggling with a very, very long list of various habits, addictions, and behaviors. And I believe, as many others do believe, the church, again, is their hope. It's not to say that we have all the answers, but we walk with these individuals through a process of healing and transformation, allowing God to do the work in their lives that He would like to do and wants to do very desperately. And we believe, once again, it is the church's role, privilege, and responsibility to offer ministry to all these individuals that have various forms of brokenness.
There are those, I'm sure, who would say, we don't, and say vigorously and vociferously reject what you say is, we don't see ourselves as broken or hurting. We see ourselves as coming into our own, finally expressing who we truly are. Speak to that.
I used to be one of those same individuals. I was not an individual that was raised in a Christian environment or church, but 29 years ago, when I surrendered my life to Christ after 17 years of living as a gay-identified man, I saw personally very clearly from Scripture that homosexual practice, not unlike many other behaviors in God's eyes, was not acceptable. I can tell you with all certainty today, had it not been for the church, when I entered the church for the first time in my life, had it not been for their grace and their mercy, their love, walking with me through a process, I would not be sitting here today.
I would say you experienced the exception rather than the rule, and a kind of church that was able to do that for you.
I would say that, yes, to a degree, I'm probably the exception. That said, many men and women worldwide that were once bound in the snare of same-sex attraction have now found freedom through a genuine, personal, intimate relationship with Christ, being helped, again, by the church. But that said, yes, I believe that, yes, we, the church, we do owe the gay community a huge apology because, again, there are times that we have not been very, very welcoming.
Are you familiar with the story of Lonnie Frisbee at all?
I'm not.
Okay, Lonnie Frisbee is kind of a famous guy. He's not alive today, but he was instrumental when he first came into a church called Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa, California. Chuck Smith. It was a church of just a few hundred people, and he was just this long-haired hippie who met Jesus while he was on acid, lying on a rock naked. Said, "Lord, if you're real, come to me." And a lot of people back in that generation, they didn't use drugs just recreationally. They were using it to have experiences. And so the Lord met him. And so he comes in, and within 6 months, they were 10,000. And the place exploded. And then it comes out that Lonnie struggled with homosexuality. And he was cast out almost immediately. He ended up at the Vineyard, and it was a church of just a few hundred people as well. And it explodes again. And here he was, and when they found out, he's gone again. Almost, day and date when they find out. I'm oversimplifying a little bit. It's a very complex story, but it's a story of what I really like in this, Philip, is that it wasn't like the Lord looked at him and said, "Well, I'm surprised by this. I didn't see that coming." Right. Who he chooses to use, to me, when he chooses broken people, it's like ding, ding, ding for me. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that a little bit? The fact that he uses broken people?
He does use broken people. Who better to speak into another life than someone who's been on the same journey in the state of their individual brokenness? That's why, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, in my many, many years living as a gay identified man, I know that side of the fence, for lack of better expression. And it's very, very tragic what you're sharing. And it's a fact that men and women have been asked to leave the church because of their issue of same-sex attraction. Right. And really, bottom line, that is beyond tragic because the church holds the only answer there is to those individuals that are agreeing with the authority of Scripture and the Lordship of Christ, that homosexual practice in God's eyes, again, is just one behavior that right. God says no man or woman is to practice.
Mm-hmm. The church, and I think many people kind of rank various sins as according to what's really a terrible sin and what's not a terrible sin, a minor sin. You don't do that, do you, Philip?
No, not at all. I think the classic scripture passage is 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 through 11, which offers a list, a catalog of various behaviors in which God says no one is to practice. What's intriguing about that scriptural passage and the list of various behaviors is that homosexuality is mentioned, but it's mentioned in the middle of the list.
Right.
That's very revealing, telling us what? In God's eyes, it's just another sin. It's not the worst sin. It's not the unpardonable sin. It's just another sin.
Boy, and where Scripture says God hates divorce, I mean, we'd just about clear out the church these days, would we not? Or promiscuity, sex before marriage. I mean, there goes our youth groups today. According to, the church in many ways morally is, or immorally, is exactly where the secular culture is out there.
Absolutely. And I really do believe with all my heart that the church is still making a tragic mistake in terms of heterosexual men and women that struggle with their various forms
Sure.
of sexual brokenness, addiction to pornography,
Right.
sex before marriage, habitual adultery. Some would say, well, now, Philip, that's more natural. Or I'll go with you to a degree, it may be more natural, but in God's eyes, it's not more acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. So we've got just over 2 minutes. Could you maybe just tell us one of the success stories of His Way Out Ministries? Without giving us any names, just tell us a success story.
Just recently, and we have his testimony on our website, a young man that I had the privilege of meeting many years ago, then entered church really in many respects for the first time in his life. Thankfully, he had a pastor, by his own admission in his testimony, that did something no other pastor had done. The pastor listened. And that got his attention. He entered into being discipled. He is now 8 years down the road in his life of regrouping And he is experiencing the transformation power of Christ in his life to resolve and leave behind his issue of same-sex attraction. We have numerous other testimonies on our website. And while I'm, to a degree, looking and focusing upon myself and what God's done in my life, there are numerous men and women around the world that have experienced the same.
We're going to talk about that when we come back. You have so much more to share with us, Phillips, and we're very glad to have you on. We're going to take a break right here, Chris, and we'll be right back.